you so much, everybody, for being here. I'm so glad you took time on what for me is a rainy, dark afternoon to be here in community. My name is Carrie Kopnick, and I serve the Chaplaincy Institute as our community minister. Just gonna make sure my notes are all good. We do this every month on the third Thursday at 4 o'clock. Let me turn that off. I don't know if you're hearing the sound, but I'm making a sound here.
Tuesday.
There we go.
Third
On the
Tuesday.
third Tuesday. And next month, we're going to do a new program about 12-step as spiritual care. And I'm hoping the next month in February, we'll do some conversation about having interfaith organizations where people come together and do interfaith work. So watch for those. I also want to share a little bit about two new electives that we have coming up here at the Chaplaincy Institute. In May 9th through 11th, we've got Countering Oppression Through Spiritual Care. The areas of focus will include resilience and trauma-informed spiritual practices, prayer as intervention, trauma and religion as a symptom of oppression, and ethics and healthy boundaries in justice work. And then June 13th and 14th, we've got Divine Feminine Wisdom and Introduction. And in this course, we explore many ways the divine feminine wisdom continues to speak to us in a time of increased white Christian nationalism and climate crisis. Now, I want to take a moment to welcome Katrina, who is our Dean of Students and core faculty here at the Chaplaincy Institute. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Katrina. A little bit about our speaker. Katrina started her work life in expressive therapies with a focus on movement forms. As a psychotherapist, she used expressive arts for healing childhood trauma and abuse. Over time, her spiritual focus became primary, so she was ordained at the Chaplaincy Institute in March of 2012 and later certified as a spiritual director. Raised as a Baha'i and later diving into shamanism, she particularly loves working with people who are non-affiliated or spiritual but not religious, and agnostic or atheist. At the Chaplaincy Institute, as I said, she's the Dean of Students while also joyfully overseeing the Arts for Awakening curriculum and envisioning new forms for transformational creativity. Yeah. Thanks so much for being here with us today, Katrina. I'll turn it over to you.
It's nice to have you. Very favorite topic. Because I was one of those people that did not really have, let's say in my early high, which was sense that about what God might is a good thing. I mean, to God was always, however, family wasn't a very good holding for children. Internalized sense of for help. I was spiritual but not religious. As in no particular fact. Long time. And then early midlife told to the Bay Area. Children didn't know anybody. Welcome, Boots. Good to see you. Into his work and all at once. Well, that's not. Didn't know about the cancer yet. Like challenge. Technically depressed, which is. I didn't know what to do. He was not the answer. Yeah, I knew what that did. Was, and then someone me go see what Like, what's a shaman? Ask my friend and go see some magical healer. And she pulled out her rat and she lit spiritually to be helpful. Me, I knew nothing about really powerful, immediate, fuzzy and a little confusing. It felt absolutely started each time I would go in, I would tell her that I had done journeys on my own, and then she would lead me through another journey and we would talk about it. My immediate spiritual being conversation with, even if they did, many of them did not, that were tangible in this spiritual reality is experienced and it trust. So I went trained in, which was with Mike, was like the world. He's no longer published. The foundation had a 3-year intensive twice a year for so I started that 3-year program and didn't have a sense that I wanted to be a shamanic healer for other people. I wasn't really sure what I was doing. I've never been called to be someone that people come to for healing, like I would do the work and then they would just walk away healed in some way. But I knew I wanted to be deeply trained in that modality of shamanic work in the core shamanic version. So just a note here, core shamanism is specifically about the practices that have existed across the world through as long as we know human history, as long as we can discover what it is. It is not rooted in one particular culture or location, because that's really important in terms of appropriation for anyone, in my opinion, anybody doing this kind of work. You don't want to be taking the practices from a culture and just extracting them and using them on your own for, especially for a monetary gain. So that's a whole conversation we can have later if we want to, if you guys are interested in that. But the core shamanic teachings are based on essentially what has been universal throughout time on every continent in this country, in this world. So the oldest shamanic um, pictographs existed in France. So just for reference, it's been all over the world. Misappropriation is a really important topic, but core shamanism is kind of like an alternative to appropriation, if that makes sense. So anyways, I embarked on that 3-year training, and soon after that is when I was diagnosed with cancer. And the reason that that's important, I sort of grapple about this always whenever I talk about my shamanic path, because this is like where it gets really personal. Um, Once I was diagnosed with cancer and I had to go through surgeries and chemotherapy, and it was like one of those, not terrible, but not that good either in terms of like the stage and all of that. Um, my shamanic work is what I credit for getting me through that. And that was 16, 17 years ago that I was diagnosed. So I've gotten to 16, 17 years without a remission because, in my mind, the shamanic work, which was a deep healing on the spiritual level, helped me to understand the degree to which part of me didn't want to be on this earth, didn't want to be in a human body, didn't want to deal with this crazy existence of human life, which I had been landed in, however that happens. And I needed to grapple with that in order to claim life on this earth, that I really wanted to stay here. Um, that sounds kind of abstract, so let me give you an example. Very personal. One journey when I had begun my cancer treatment that I uh, was about a year full of treatment, surgeries, and chemotherapy, not quite a year, but most of a year. And I saw Wendy regularly for the shamanic work. My journeys continued through this time. At one point, I went in and went into a journey, and I had one primary teacher who had shown up very early as I started this work. And he accompanied me through these years of early learning this form of shamanic practice. And in this journey, he took me for a walk. I did not know where we were going. I'm like, where are we going? He said, I'm showing you where we're going. Just come with me. And we were walking. And I still get chills when I tell this story. As we were walking, I saw it was getting brighter and brighter in front of me. And we were walking toward a very bright light opening. And there was a part of me that was like, wait a minute, this is what I have heard. I've never had a near-death experience. That's one of the things I've heard about it. And it's like, is this like moving toward death? And he said, that's where you are headed. That's where you're going. And I said, I don't want to do that. He said, well, that's what you're choosing. That's what you've been doing. And that's where we're headed. That's where you are headed. And I said, but I can't. I have two young children. My kids were 2 years old and 5 years old at that time, or maybe they were 6 and 7 at that point. I mean, 3 and 7, something like 3 and 6. So I can't, I can't, I can't. But it was made very clear to me in the journey that that's what I was yearning for in some way. That's where I wanted to be going, and that's where I was going. And the cancer for me was a manifestation of that. And I'm not saying that that's always true for people, but for me, that was true. And he said, well, if you don't want to go there, you need to change what you're doing and you need to absolutely get grounded to the earth and stay there. And you need to work on that. And I don't know what else he said, but so he's like, are you sure you want to do that? And I said, yes, I have to. I have two young children. I cannot leave them. So he said, all right, let's go over here instead. So he turned me around and we walked over to some place on the earth where I lay down, and a whole bunch of beings that I couldn't tell you who they were tying me and tethering me to the ground. They were tying me with some cords that were being tethered into the earth. And he said, but you need to fight for this. You need to fight to stay on the earth. So that's why I say shamanism saved my life, because I did need to fight for it. And I then needed to take that to therapy to continue to work with why I had that. And then I did some medicine work later on to get more clear about why I had this thing pulling me off the planet. Um, so that wasn't the very beginning of my shamanic work, but it was pretty early on, and it helped me to understand how important and powerful that kind of work can be. That direct experience of spiritual intervention and wisdom and knowledge, which for me happens through shamanic work. People do it in all kinds of different ways. I mean, I'm an interfaith trained person. I work at an interfaith seminary. I know there's so many ways to experience the divine, so many ways to encounter whatever we call that great mystery. I encounter it through multiple spirits that exist in different levels of spiritual reality. I journey to the upper world or the lower world, which are different levels of reality according to shamanic beliefs and core shamanism. And in those realms, I meet animal spirits, I meet goddess spirits, I meet religious figures occasionally, all kinds of spirit helpers that show up because they have the desire to help human beings. And the training that I did with Michael Harness Foundation led us through multiple journeys where we explored spiritual reality, traveling to upper worlds, traveling through time, experiencing different wisdom sources, which it's all there. It's all available through very simple practices of journeying. The practices are not complicated at all. And like any practice, it requires a certain degree of commitment and persistence. And I will also say, as I just said to my son last night, you don't have to believe in the existence of spirits to be able to journey and have it help you. I remember I actually did a journey, meaning I led my son, who's now 25, but he went on a journey when he was in his teenage years when I was going through my training, and I took both of my kids each on a journey because they were curious what I was doing. And my son had all these really interesting experiences, and I can't remember, and I wouldn't tell you if I did, but he came back and he said, "That was really interesting." And he told me all this stuff. And he said, "It was like my imagination is just amazing." And I said, "Okay, you can think it's imagination, and that's fine because it still has the same message. It still has the same experience for you, even if you think you're making it up. That's fine. You don't have to believe there is some external reality to it because none of us really knows what's really true in this realm of spirituality." Um, so my own story, I did grapple for years with that question of whether or not I was making the whole thing up, despite the impact of the journeys and how over and over again, things would happen that were helpful, that were healing, that were guidance that I really needed. I mean, I could tell you stories and stories about things that were so impactful in those journeys. But that didn't mean that I actually believed it was really true necessarily, because sometimes I still think, I mean, it's been how many years now? I started the work in 2005 in the fall. I still sometimes think I'm making the whole thing up. How could this really, I mean, like I'll talk about a journey with somebody else who does the work, and then we say, "Isn't it crazy these things that we get to see and do? And like, how can this be real?" But it feels real. We believe it's real. And like all spiritual things, how do we explain it? Right? But shamanic work is based on the belief that all beings have a spiritual reality. It's an animist perspective. The trees, the wind, goddess figures through time, gods, goddesses, ancestors, they all have a spiritual existence that is somewhere and that we can journey to and be in relationship with. And as my colleague Daniel Prechtel says, it's all about the relationship with the spirits. I like to say that occasionally that shamanic work is like doing spiritual direction with the spirits because they help me find the way. They help me understand my own spiritual beliefs and my own blocks and my own issues. Um, as a spiritual director myself, one of my favorite things to do is to work with people who are embarking on their own shamanic practice. I'm not a shamanic healer. That's nah, not never, not never, occasionally. But what I really love is to see other people take on these practices and deepen their own relationship to spirit beings, however they find those beings to be, the realm and the practices are kind of consistent and familiar to people doing this work. But what one finds in their own journeys is about your own path. It's about who your teachers are and what your own animals, your own power animals or helping spirit animals are, what they are signifying for you and what gifts they bring to you. It's all about your own spiritual journey. I don't advise people to go look up in a book, what does eagle mean? Well, you can do that, and sometimes it is actually what eagle means to you, but more often you want to go and ask eagle. Eagle, show me what your lesson is. Show me what your gift to me is. What is it that I'm supposed to be doing with you? The relationship with your spirit helpers can tell you everything you need to know, more specifically than you're going to find it in an encyclopedia. So mentoring people who are doing the shamanic work is one of my favorite things, because people find their own way with it. And all they really kind of need is the encouragement to start the work and keep going and then asking questions along the way. It's a very accessible practice. Michael Harner used to say that shamanic work is very, oh gosh, what's that word I want? It's, it challenges power structures because it's a direct, like I've just said about 5 times, direct relationship to spirit. You don't need a mediator. Most people, there are some exceptions, but most people have the ability to do this work. They just might need to learn how to do it, but then you don't need a lot of teaching to learn how to do it. And it can be so many different things for different people. There are a few people, I've heard it said that actually it's like maybe 10% of the people, so it's more than a few, but there is a portion of people in the world who don't seem to have the ability to journey, not through lack of being deeply spiritual, because I know one of these folks, amazing, beautiful spiritual person, but journeying doesn't work for her. So sometimes it doesn't work for people, but mostly it does. Um, so I did not say, but I will say, that the 3 purposes of shamanic work, keeping in mind that historically in cultures around the world, shamans in those cultures, which I'm not a shaman because I don't use that word. I don't live in a culture that recognizes shamans. So I'm a practitioner, but there are cultures in which shamans are incredibly important, and their role there is to do guidance and healing as well as teaching the people that they live amongst. Those same purposes are still true for shamanic work and for practitioners, even though we don't call ourselves shamans because we're not in those cultures. So those are the processes by which the things that happen within shamanic work: healing, teaching, and guidance. I feel like I could always talk more and more about it, and I have no idea how long I've been talking, but I think I'm just going to pause and see what people have to ask.
Yeah, Ellen, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, thank you. I'm curious when you talk about the journeys, what does that look like when you're walking someone through that? What does the starting process look like and getting into that, if you don't mind sharing?
I do not mind. Um, and students hear this in the classes at Chaplaincy Institute also. So this will be repetition for some of you. A journey within the structure of core shamanism is based upon starting with imagining a place on the planet that either goes up or goes down. And it's pretty much intuitive as far as whether one would go up or down, because they're different directions and what you might encounter might be different, but each practitioner will go where they feel drawn to go or where the spirits they work with direct them to go on a given day. So it doesn't matter where you go, but you do, let's say you're going to the lower world. And what I mean by that is core shamanism is based on this, the cosmology, as I like to call it, of spiritual reality from the core shamanic perspective is that there is an upper world of levels of spiritual reality, and there are lower worlds. And it's not in any way analogous to heaven and hell, just in case that's what occurs to you, because that would be a natural thought, but it's not. But upper and lower world. And then there's also the middle world. And the middle world is the spiritual realm that we exist within, but we live in ordinary reality. So we don't see the spiritual beings like the spirits of the trees outside our window. We don't see them, but they exist. We might see them or feel them if we're attuned and open to that spiritual reality, or we just feel it somehow. But when you do a journey initially in this work, you do always want to go to the upper world or lower world, not stay in the middle world. That's for the reason that all of the spirits that you encounter in the upper world or the lower world are compassionate, helping spirits. They will do no harm. And anything that happens in those levels, even if it's scary, like being swallowed by a monster, which monster is not the right word, being swallowed by a shark, for example, being ripped apart and burned up. These are things that happen in journeys. But when it's in the upper world or the lower world, that's all part of a spiritual process. It's not actually destructive in any way. So you want to go to the upper or the lower world, because the middle world has spiritual beings who may be not all beneficial for every human. Like the whole concept of ancestor spirits who may exist to benefit their family and the generations that came after them. They may not always want to be helpful for people they perceive as, let's say, enemies of their family, but they're helpful for their family. So that's one example. Another one is spirits that are misguided and disincarnate, no longer alive, but not transcended to the upper or lower worlds of existence. So there are spiritual beings in the middle world who can be harmful to humans if you don't yet know how to journey in that world. So go up or go down. And the way you do that, I always have to say all of that because otherwise it would feel like I was inviting people to do something that might be harmful if they weren't aware of the guidelines. So when you do journey to the upper or lower world, what you do is you imagine a location on the planet that you actually know that goes up or goes down. If you're going down, it might be down through a tree trunk, down through a well, going downstairs in an ancient structure that goes like 3 stories down, like the ones they have in Rome. You imagine yourself descending, and you keep going until you come out into a landscape that's not underground, but it's a whole new landscape. Like when I travel down to the lower world, I go through a body of water, and then I crawl through a wet tunnel, and then I drop down onto a sandy beach. And there's an ocean, and over there are mountains, and back there's a forest, and way down there's other things all over the place. So it's a landscape that I then journey through as I wish. And once I'm there, I would encounter either spirits that I might ask to be with me if they show up. That's wonderful. I might encounter ones that just show up because that's what they think needs to happen today. Or I might just go exploring. You never know what happens. But once you're there, you get to do what you choose to do. You can go with spirits that are inviting you to go with them. You can say no if something doesn't feel comfortable. You can come back out of the journey anytime you want. You can go explore, what's up that mountain. Let me just climb up that mountain and see, or let me see where this horse wants to take me. Let me try to have a conversation with these beings I encounter and see if they can communicate with me in some way. So that's what a journey could look like. Most often, people will use a soundtrack, a repetitious beat, a drum or a rattle, or really it can be any number of things. A recorded soundtrack or somebody drumming or doing something like that and holding a space while you journey. That can be a really nice way to journey if you have access to that.
Hey, Katrina, how do you come out of it? You told us how to get into it, but how do you come out
There's all,
safely?
yeah, there's always well, you can always choose to come back. And then Eleanor, I see your hand also. There's always, well, there usually is a callback. Like whenever I do a journey whenever I'm hosting a journey for people, I have a callback, which is what's also on recordings from the Foundation for Shamanic Studies. That very repetitious drum beat or rattle, all of a sudden it'll change rhythm. It'll pause, it'll get different, and then there's a faster beat that calls you back. At that point, you turn around and retrace your steps and come back to where you started. And you very much want to come back with that clear intention that you're leaving that place behind and you're journeying back to the place where your body is and landing in your body. Eleanor, I see your hand is up.
Thank you. Okay, I don't know how to get it down, but I'll figure it out. So thank you so much for sharing your personal experience and B, how you use shamanism. And given that you're teaching the class, or doing this talk, that it's really helpful for me. I am a spiritual director, and I've done all those things that I kind of refuse to, list on a certificate on a wall, kind of a thing. And they've all been useful to me personally, and I've kind of used them, Reiki and Himalayan singing bowls and different kinds of meditative approaches. But a couple things. I mean, one is I'm the same. I don't want to hang a shingle on any of that, and I don't know if it's. I don't want to get up in front of a lot of people and claim that I'm an expert in Himalayan singing bowls. I just know that they've helped me, and I've been trained in using them so they can help others. How do you incorporate? Do you find yourself kind of quietly incorporating it into your spiritual direction practice, or?
Not really. That's a really good question. Let's see, how I conduct my own spiritual life outside of sessions certainly has an impact, and that is all based on shamanic practice primarily. I mean, yes, I have at times had an intensive sitting meditation practice, and I've participated in some other things at times, but mostly it's very shamanic. That does not come into a session with clients unless the client is looking for that.
Mhm.
It may come in the sense that when I go into a session with any client, I am asking spirit to be with me. I'm asking them to help me know or see or say what is in the best interest of that client. But I'm not bringing shamanic work actively into the session other than that. However,
Understood.
when the client or directee is interested in that work, absolutely. But then we work with what is their interest? What do they want to get out of it? I mean, just with any spiritual direction session, it's all about what that directee is interested in, what they know, what they need, how they want to work with that. If what I know or what I have done is helpful, great. If they want to do shamanic journeying, great. What I have seen develop and I will say that has all been coming into my sessions more recently, like in the last 2 years. I think prior to 2 or 3, and I love doing spiritual direction. I've always loved it in any form, but 2 or 3 years ago, I think is when people started to say to me, "Oh, you're a shamanic practitioner. Can we do some of that here?"
Yeah.
So I will do the mentoring I talked about to help them develop that practice themselves. And some people want to journey in session. And then what we do is what I call it's a simultaneous journey where, and I think this may be what my original teacher, Wendy, way back 16 years ago was doing with me. That the client figures out what they want to be working on in this moment, in this journey they're going to take. And then I create the soundtrack. I use a recorded soundtrack. And then I myself also journey at the same time. And I do all of this on Zoom if I am on Zoom, which is mostly what my work is these days. I will do my own shamanic journey, asking my spirit helpers to help them and asking my spirit helpers to tell me if there's anything I should be doing to support their spiritual work. So
Love it.
I'm asking spirit for help very actively while they journey also, and they have their own journey, and then we talk about it after. So that's one
I
way,
love it. Thank you. That's so helpful.
and that's only
Thanks.
one way. Different
And
people.
do you within the do you within CHI, do you have like practical introduction to do you teach a class on this, or does somebody teach a class on this?
I teach one session. It's
Yeah.
about I think it's 2.5 hours long, in which I say not so much the personal stuff, but certainly the what is shamanism and how does it work and how do you do it. And then in that session with students on Zoom, we do have, I'm looking at Scott, who's coming up on this event. We do have one journey that happens in session, meaning that each person in their own location in the US is taking a journey all at the same time, similar to the way I do it with clients one-on-one, but we do it as a group, everybody in their own location. It's very much an introduction, and it's not a long journey, but at least introduces the practice and the kind of work that it is.
Thank you so much.
Welcome. What other questions does anybody have? Betty, I saw your hand first. I think you're muted.
So nice to see you, Katrina. Is it okay to reveal our connection?
Absolutely.
When I entered the spiritual direction program at ChI, Katrina was my spiritual director. Like with most of these trainings that you get, that you're going to learn how to do, you have to be doing it yourself. And I came to spiritual direction because as I did training to be a practitioner of guided imagery in music, and I thought the spiritual direction program would make what I could offer richer, and also for myself. But that has proven to be true, and I have so many questions. I hardly know where to start, but maybe just to start would be the language you're using to describe the shamanic journey is very much part of the guided imagery and music journey. A little different in the sense that the music will take you where you need to go, or it's a tool. So, but my experience, the first time I did guided imagery music for myself, I had such a powerful experience that I could see how spiritual it was, how deep it could take me. And as a musician, I liked doing both, using both. So I guess the first question that comes to mind is the commonalities that you see, because I know you've done movement therapy, I think. And so the commonalities you see with shamanism and the guided imagery, music, and spiritual direction. I mean, I know that's a big question, but
Yes, but it's a really good question. And going back to the fact that my first training professionally was in expressive arts therapy, which is all
Right.
based on the power of the creative process and what emerges from the creative process. So, in my mind, what emerges from the creative process, whether it's an image or a sound or a response to music, it can be understood. I mean, it can be understood in multiple ways. It may just be coming from a deep unconscious part of oneself. It also could be something coming from spirit and coming through us. I don't think we really know, right? And John Mabry, actually, in the I will shamelessly say that there's a book that John Mabry and Dan Prechtel and myself wrote. It's called Soul Journeys. And we do talk about this one thing as part of it. It's the book is a comparison of Christianity and shamanic work. So it's an interesting comparison written by two Christians and myself, because John and Daniel are both Christian-based ministers, but also very interfaith, and I am who I am. But we do talk there a little bit about the imaginal and how the imaginal does not mean imaginary. It doesn't mean that it's make-believe.
Yeah.
And it may be a creation of spirit. And I will say that one of my most profound early experiences of spirit was in an authentic movement practice. And I think that this is where it all, if you believe that, as I do, that spirit or the divine is everywhere, why would it not come through or come in to us, connect to us, or how would we can connect to these through different ways? And specifically, guided imagery. Some people refer to a journey as guided imagery. I don't use that language because they are two different things, but they're also extremely close.
Yes, in the practice that I do as a practitioner, I don't do a preset guidance, but I'm there to be journey with the person and respond to them while they're in their journey. So, yeah. Well, as I often say these days, I love how spirit moves. And that I think there's something in shamanism for me to explore for myself. So
everybody who's interested, it's always there. And there's also one book by Michael Harner, who's the person that established the Foundation for Shamanic Studies. A book by him, which is called, oh my God.
Spiritual Democracy?
No, it's not called that, but that's a great title. Shamanism. What is it called? Oh my goodness. The Way of the Shaman.
Okay.
The Way of the Shaman. And it was written in 1982. It's old, but the practice doesn't change. It gives a very good basic introduction, as I tried to do briefly verbally here, but a good introduction to what the work is and how to embark on it yourself.
Say the name of the book again.
The Way of the Shaman.
Okay.
And his last name is Harner, Harner.
Okay.
And Sandra, I do see your hand.
Thank you, Katrina.
Yes, thanks, Betty. Good to see you. Sandra, you have a question? Oh, you're muted still.
There. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, first of all, I really appreciate a lot of what you said about shamanism. I've been curious about shamanism for years, but I've had some anxiety about it and having to do with, well, I really like what you said about the client is in control. You know, like if you need to come out, you can. I started my career as a music therapist. So I'd love to talk to you, Betty, at some point, because I did a lot of guided imagery, and I just say, let the music take you where you need to go. But what I found is a lot of times people went to places that I couldn't deal with because I didn't have the skills. So I went back to school and got a master's in psychotherapy. But anyway, I just wanted to mention a few experiences I had along these lines. When I was in grad school, somebody did music guided imagery in a class. And I went, I think they opened it by like going, like sinking down. And I went to a really scary place, and overwhelming place, and sort of disintegrated in this class. Now, looking back, it's a place I probably needed to go. It had to do with some unresolved grief at the death of my brother. But it really freaked me out. The power of that. And so that was one thing. At one point, I went to a shaman who was doing a class, and a couple of my friends were going. This was much more recent, as an adult, and that you were trying to find your spirit animal. And in that case, it just didn't affect me at all. It's like, this is bullshit. I don't believe this at all. You know, it's just very different. Okay, and the other thing I was going to say, I've had ketamine treatment for depression, and that is another journey where you leave your body and you go somewhere, you know, and all these things are sort of similar and interconnected. That's, yeah. And then I also wanted to ask is, you know, does a shamanic journey require a substance, you know, like a hallucinogen, stuff like that? Okay.
Yeah, no, it does
Mhm.
not at all. All of the training that I did was absolutely without any substances.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
That, uh, yeah, and while you can read about Michael Harner's history and entrance into the study of shamanism, that he did embark on some plant medicine work. I think it was, I'm not sure if I think it was ayahuasca with
Uh-huh.
folks. I see somebody knows this, and but all of his training was not at all about using any substances at all. And
Uh-huh.
I myself did not do any of that until much later, you know, not much later, but it took me many years to even consider doing that, because I'm like, why would I do that? Because I have this journey practice that's so profound and helpful.
Right. Why would you need it? Yeah. And, you know,
And
I was a little anxious about ketamine too, like, where am I going to go? But I've had, you know, many ketamine treatments, and it's always been pleasant and loving. And I felt surrounded by love. You know, there was nothing scary that ever happened. So anyway, just some comments and
yeah,
some,
there can be scary things. And like you said, sometimes they are, I mean, I have done some plant medicine work myself, and it was hard and it
yeah,
was incredibly valuable. So,
yeah.
but that was me. And I'm not saying in any way that that's what
Right.
someone else should do.
You know, looking back, it was a place I needed to go. My brother had died a few years earlier, and I had never dealt with his loss, because he died by suicide. And you know, I had a whole lot of grieving to do that I never did. But you know, it's hard work. And the teacher of the class, who was a psychologist, was pretty skilled. He was skilled in sort of helping me come back to the present and, you know, be okay.
Yeah, it sounds like your experience was what I think is really important, is having someone who is knowledgeable and skilled and really holds
Mhm.
a space if anyone is going to embark on that work. It's really
Right.
important. As you say, a lot of really deep stuff can come up and it can be powerful, but what is that? Set and setting? Who says that? Michael Pollan? Set and
Right.
setting is so
Right.
important. So anyways, yes, thank you for your sharing those, Sandra.
Yeah.
Linda, question?
Hi, thank you so much for this. Could you speak a little bit about the role of shaman as healer? And does that happen in journeying, or what might that look like? I'm curious.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, so there's a lot of different ways that can look. And I can only tell you what I know, because I know this happens in so many ways across the world in different cultures, different places, but both within a journey and I'll just say practitioner because for whomever we're talking about, but because I don't personally, anyways, for the practitioner who might be called a shaman in some places, the work can be done either within a journey and this can be when the person is not even there, like there is long distance healing work that can be done. And all of these are things that I sometimes do with folks when it is shown to be needed. I never would advertise this, that I do it, but if I'm led to do it by my spirit helpers, I will do these things. But so one can do it long distance if that's because remember, we're in spiritual reality, so time and space, well, specifically space is not even really relevant. Well, time also, you can go forward or backward in time to do healing things too, which is a whole other story. So there is that the practitioner might journey and do that work, whether the client is present physically or not. But there's also, when I say journey, that doesn't mean that the person is like lying down with their eyes closed necessarily. They are in spiritual reality and in communion with their helpers, their spirit helpers or teachers, but they also may be working physically on the physical level. Like, for example, a soul retrieval is something that, there is a journey that's taken, but then for the practitioner, and then that practitioner physically brings the soul back, meaning puts it back into the person's being through physical gestures. So they are journeying, but they're not present also here. There's like a kind of like a dual consciousness. You're in the spiritual realm, but you're also in the physical world. So that was one way. Healing can be all kinds of things also. Yeah. I mean, there's extraction, there's soul retrieval, there are cutting of cords, this is just a short list. I'm sure there are other things that one might say. And then there are the healing journeys that one takes where it's not really clear what's happening. For example, gathering a handful of gold, green gemstones and putting them inside somebody as a healing process. I don't know what we call that. If a spirit helper leads me to do that, I do it. I trust their lead. I am not the expert in the journeys. The human who's doing the journey, that phrase, a hollow bone, that's what we are. We're just channeling spirit through us to bring whatever healing might be that spirit is giving to be given. If that makes sense. And feel like there's a lot I left out there because it's a wide topic. But I also feel like it's really important to acknowledge that someone who takes a journey, and you can be brand new to the practice of shamanic work, you may find the healing practices in your own work, in the journeys, that it doesn't take an intermediary to do it for you. You can journey yourself and ask for healing for a particular thing, and the spirits may help you with that. You never know what exactly they will do, but you can ask and hopefully they will. So.
Thank you.
Could you clarify that? Excuse me, I don't want to interrupt if you're not finished. Oh, just clarify that a little bit, Katrina, that did you say you as a practitioner channel spirit to the person whose journey? Is that what you said?
It can happen all different ways, really. I mean, if I do a journey with the intention to help someone else's healing, that can happen in a variety of different ways. Either my spirit might take me through some journey that is in my journey, sort of spiritually operating on them in a way,
Okay.
whatever form that happens in the journey, or it might be sort of helping the person find their own healing in their own consciousness.
Okay.
And the other thing I threw in at the last minute was people can journey on their own to ask for healing and find that with their own experiences in their own journeys.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Welcome. And what that healing is, just to say, we never know what that really means either. If I want to say, well, heal me of this particular illness, well, maybe that's not what's going to happen, but there might be something that's needing to be healed that might be part of that illness. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
I do.
yeah, right.
Well, friends, I can't believe it, but it's almost an hour. Our time together already gone by. My goodness. Is there any last thing you want to be sure to say, Katrina, before we bid our friends goodbye?
I think my core point has really come through, that this is work that is accessible, that can be magical for those who are interested in doing it. Magical might not be the right word, but wondrous maybe is a better word, and powerful. And it's not always that, it's a practice. So if you do embark on it, there's great authors. Sandra Ingerman is one of my favorites, to look her up, her writing. There are other people that are wonderful also. People that come out of the core shamanism tradition are, in my mind, really all good, all of them. And it's there. If it calls you, check it out. That's really it.
That's a lovely invitation. Well, thank you so much. And thank you so much, friends, for joining us. I will really appreciate you taking time to be here. And I hope to see some of you in our ChI classrooms or gatherings, or ChI classrooms again. Come for Divine Feminine. I'll send an email out with links to all of the books and the things that Katrina talked about, and a little bit more information about those open courses. But I'll stay on for a minute if anybody has any questions.